Welcome in, everybody, and welcome back to the Marshall Experience. Excited to have you guys here tonight. Just real quick, we are going to recap. Last week, we recapped the round one rookies that were taken in this recent draft and kind of where they're valued at on their depth chart and where should we value them in the fantasy draft. Today, we are going to be kind of covering the sleepers slash diamonds in the rough slash deep stashes and dynasty, kind of the guys that are going to take about a year or two to really step into their role. Could be depth chart problems, could be loaded rooms, could be just could use a couple years in the professional NFL to implement their game into the NFL. So we're going to go over a couple of those players before we get started. Obviously, we want to give a shout out to Sports Lounge Media. Appreciate them for allowing us to continue to operate on their platform. If you guys have not gone to check them out, you are missing out. 793 subscribers so far. We are trying to push those numbers. We got some exciting news coming up, guys, and that's kind of why we're starting late tonight. Big meeting tonight. Big news coming up in the next couple of weeks that we will release once given the permission to, but some really big news on our end and the Sports Lounge Media end as well. So again, appreciate them as much as we do, and go check them out on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. They post everywhere. Anything. They just covered NBA tonight. They're covering NBA playoffs. So go check them out. It's a good time, and come join the fun. So we're going to get just started right into this tonight. Again, I'm going to share this screen, guys, real quick, but just to we are going to be covering tonight. We're going to be projecting for the season, right? That's how we're going to rank them. Let me pull up the rookies here. We are going to be covering tonight the sleepers slash deep stashes and dynasty, right? We cover a lot of dynasty here. We participate in a lot of dynasty. Dynasty meaning you're building your team for years. Redraft is more of you're drafting a new team every year, right? Dynasty, you kind of get more of the actual GM feel, like you're building a team, right? You're building a championship squad. So we're going to go over a few of these real quick, and we'll go over about 10 to 15 players tonight. So if you want to grab your notepads and take some notes down, by all means. But we're going to get started here. We're going to get started first with the wide receiver, Deshaun Stribling for San Francisco, was taken in the 33rd overall pick, right, on night two. Was honestly a mid-round draft pick in most drafts, most mock drafts, in the actual NFL draft. But in my opinion, they probably could have traded down, still gotten their guy. But honestly, doubts about the team's maneuvering should be held against Stribling, because what are they going to do with Ayuk? What are they going to do with Juwan Jennings? I mean, it's so up in the air. Mike Evans coming in kind of does make that a problem for him. So, other concerns were throughout the rumors was his age, right? Coming in at 24 as a rookie, 4 years in college, 2 years at Washington State as a freshman and sophomore. Then he transferred to Oklahoma State, where he broke his arm, kind of setting back his NFL trajectory, right? They were saying that he could have went first round before that, but instead he returned for his senior year, transferred to Ole Miss, and finished out with 806 for a playoff team. So, now he kind of heads to San Francisco, where they have now Mike Evans, Ricky Pearsall. They also have backup veterans, Christian Kirk, Demarcus Robinson. I mean, the wide receiver room is pretty deep, right? I think Demarcus Robinson got a lot of playing time last year. I think that's a trusted ally for Brock Purdy. Christian Kirk coming on his first year. He's a veteran wide receiver in the league. I don't think that they're just going to push him to the side. Mike Evans and Ricky Purcell, obviously, at the top of the depth chart. But and again, on Strive, not knock on Stribling, obviously his 4.36 40-yard dash in this year's combine, it provides something that none of those names that I mentioned can offer, right? Is the speed. But in my opinion, playing time could be a frustration, even if he makes big plays in Kyle Shanahan's offense. So for me, it's Stribling is definitely a second round pick. He's more of a not a guy that you guys are going to want to start from the get go. Not bank on, hey, I need a wide receiver really bad, so I'm going to take Stribling with my first round pick. No, that's not how it should go. This is definitely a guy that could possibly see a year on the bench before you see him take a role. I kind of see him as like the Luther Burden of this draft. You saw Luther Burden kind of slow things down last year. Didn't really do what he was drafted to do, right? Not sure on exact stats, but if I remember correctly, it was like 400 some yards and a low end of amount of touchdowns. So, same with Matthew Golden, right? Matthew Golden didn't score his first touchdown until the postseason. So, I think it's more one of those to where he's just in a crowded room, and we'll kind of see what role he holds. Okay. Next one we're going to talk about is Ted Hurst, Tampa Bay. Okay. Really, Hurst offers really everything that you're looking for in a wide receiver prospect. Okay. Unless you realize that his massive production occurred in the Sun Belt Conference for a Georgia State team that really had nothing else going for it and repeatedly chucked the ball in his direction. Even then, okay, he came out looking pretty good. Okay. Hurst improved, in my opinion, his draft stock come this last combine in 2026, ran a 4.42, and then the broad jump was 135 inches and had a 36.5 inch vertical. That the vertical was slightly disappointing in some eyes, but again, Mike Evans doesn't have a big vertical. AJ doesn't have a big vertical. Those bigger body wide receivers, they tend to not necessarily have a big vertical because they have the bigger body to operate in those situations. I think he profiles as a classic X wide receiver and a downfield playmaker in the NFL. I think he has enough size and strength to theoretically earn considerable volume. Okay. But for now, the Bucks may have a room that's hard for him to do that, right? This may allow him to necessarily work a lot with the second unit, given that they drafted Emeka Egbuka last year, Jalen McMillan the year before that, and they brought back Chris Godwin. Yes, Mike Evans is gone. It's a big loss, but those three are used to the offense. Chris Godwin isn't a veteran, and again, Jalen McMillan, if healthy, was a fantastic wide receiver. Emeka Egbuka really broke out last year and could arguably been the rookie of the year through the first 8 weeks, right? I think Ted McMillan kind of lasted him out there in arguable fashion, but if we're cutting it off, I mean, he had a very, very strong first half. So, and that's just coming with, again, the same thing as Stribling, crowded wide receiver room. I think it takes him a year or two to kind of sit behind, what do they want to do with Jalen McMillan? Do they want to pick up that option, or would they rather run with Ted Hurst? Could they trade Chris Godwin? You know what I mean? Like, I just took wide receiver needy team. There's so many options if this guy works out that they could open up to maybe a 4 wide receiver set. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that they could do, but again, we have to see the situation and how it plays out. But in my head, he does have a few guys on the depth chart above him. So I would be weary to spending that late first, early second on him when he's going to sit on your bench and maybe possibly your taxi squad for a year. Next guy we're going to talk about, I think, is a little more intriguing. Zachariah Branch. Okay. I think Branch has really built up a big enough reputation that it was actually disappointing that he ran a 4.35 40 at the combine. That's more than fast enough by most standards, but Branch is facing a high bar because of the numerous other questions in his prospect profile, right? I mean, that's really the strength that he had. At USC and Georgia, he mostly found success on the kick returns, screens, other planned touches rather than doing damage with crisp routes and contested catches downfield. Okay, so this is definitely a guy that you have to game plan for both off the defense, on the defense, and on the offense, if that makes sense. 5'9", 177. I think the Falcons saw enough in him to, make him a third-round pick, obviously. But, I think they just now got Jahan Dotson and Zacchaeus. Maybe he fights into that mold to fight for snaps behind Drake London. But the new offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees, right, coming from Notre Dame. I'm a big Notre Dame guy. I love Tommy Rees. I love what he could possibly do for this offense. I think that he could draw some things up for Zachariah Branch and use him in those situations. So again, more than Stribling, more than Hurst, I do like Zachariah Branch just because of the situation, new offensive coordinator, what he can do with the football. And I just think that I would much rather spend that early second on Zachariah Branch than I would Hurst or Stribling. Next guy we're going to get into is Jeremy Bernard for Pittsburgh. They took him with the 47th overall pick in the 2026 NFL draft. Really finalizing their offseason makeover of a lackluster wide receiver room. Obviously, they tried doing that with Mekhi Lemon. Philadelphia jumped above them and sniped that opportunity from them. It's really badly needed. The new head coach, Mike McCarthy, presumably installs a more spread out offense than what I would take to be Arthur Smith's offense in the tight end heavy attack offense at that. Bernard initially figures to probably compete with like Roman Wilson and others for the number wide 3 spot. Obviously, they have DK Metcalf and now newly acquired Michael Pittman Jr. These guys, DK and Pittman, neither of them have significant contract guarantees past 2026. So, if this guy works out and, you can move off of one of them instead of having to sign them both, that's very, very potential. And you had a diamond in the rough in the draft. I think he's really described as high floor, low ceiling prospect. I never really got elite production in college. He did top 400 yards each of the past 3 seasons. Had last year, 2025, 862.7, and then he had 2 rushing touchdowns as well at Alabama. After finishing his career strong, I would say, combine ran a 4.48. He's 6'1", 206. 32.5-inch vertical was pretty poor for his size, but a 1.52 10-yard split and an impressive broad jump really threw him up on the draft boards. So again, I think that he was basically at this point fighting with Roman Wilson for the number 3 spot. Again, Roman Wilson has comfortableness, has fluidity in the offense with Aaron Rodgers, if that's the quarterback, or it's Will Howard. He's been with him for a year, however that looks. But yeah, I think that, at most he's battling for a wide receiver 3 spot. So again, he's more in the range of Stribling, Hurst. I think that he's going to have to more so sit a year. Again, what do they do with Metcalf and Pittman? Do they pick up, another wide receiver next year? There's a lot of options with that considering their contracts. So Bernard definitely interesting pick there, but I would be wary to spend too value of a pick on that. So we'll talk about Max Glare here for a second, right? Second round pick out of Ohio State for the tight end room. He really joins a crowded tight end room that already has Colby Parkinson, Tyler Higbee, Terrence Ferguson, who was drafted last year, and I think Davis Allen is his name. Those four combined for, I think, 150 targets last season. Okay. With only 25 of those going to Ferguson, which was a 2025 second round pick. Parkinson was easily the most productive of the bunch last year, especially in the red zone. But Glare and Ferguson are the upside plays for fantasy. Okay. With the potential to eventually earn 3-down roles, okay, in an offense where Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams are the clear lead targets. Okay, let me explain this out to you. So, Claire filled a similar role at Ohio State last year while sharing the field with a superstar wide receiver duo at Ohio State, right? Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith. He caught 43 passes for 448 yards and 2 touchdowns. Okay, that is coming after a year scoring nearly 704 touchdowns in his year at Purdue in 2024. Okay, he did have occasional struggles with drops, but was very adaptive in the fact that he got open in college. Receiving ability is definitely considered one of the strong parts of his game. I think this is more of so the guy that, you spend a mid-round second on. You have a weak tight end room. This is a guy that's definitely going to have to sit a year with this tight end room. But again, after this, I'm sure Davis Allen's not on a large contract. I'm sure Parkinson, maybe a couple years. Tyler Higbee, he's been too hurt. I think they've been signing him to 1-year deals. So, kind of where do you go from here, right? So the projections here are 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think that's maybe a little high. I think he catches a touchdown or 2. I think that, yards wise, you're maybe looking at 200, 250. Nothing extravagant. Again, I think Kobe Parkinson definitely leads that tight end room again this year. I think, again, you see a little 3 tight end set with Claire and Ferguson tossed in there. So, again, not a high pick for me for Max Claire. So, next guy we're going to talk about is Antonio Williams. Okay, went to the Commanders early in the 3rd round, the 71st overall pick. 4-year contributor at Clemson, averaging between 43 and 65 yards each season while playing more than 3/4 of the snaps in the slot. So his most productive season came in 2024 when he went where I lost it. Sorry. He had 900 yards, 11 receiving, and then also a rushing touchdown in 14 games. Returned punts for the Tigers, but never scored a touchdown, but did have a modest 9 yards per return. Really, the general theme is volume over explosiveness. With Williams averaging between 10.2 and 12.1 yards per reception each season. He might average less than that, obviously, as a slot specialist in the NFL, but also had a very strong showing in the combine, a 4.41, nearly a 40-inch vertical. For now, the Commanders likely will have Williams compete with like Luke McCaffrey for the slot role, badly needing really somebody to step up next to wide receiver 1, Terry McLaurin, though, right? So there's the ample opportunity is for sure there. I think a lot of Commander fans are behind this pick. I think a lot of Commander fans like the player. I just think that we got to see how it plays in training camp. But I would say Antonio Williams is up here with my Zachariah Branch. Right, there's a lot of opportunity there. I think that I think that he would be a guy I would draft before the Bernards or the Hurst and the Striblings. So we're going to kind of skip around here a little bit. I just want to talk about a few players that, again, I think are really going to jump off the page here and have the opportunity. So we're going to talk about Chris Bell for a second here. Drafted to Miami in the 3rd round, 94th overall. Really just not much expectation for year one contributions. He did suffer an ACL tear in late November and underwent surgery in mid-December. A 4-year career at Louisville, really known for his strength, right? 6'2", body frame, 222. But above all else, really, Bell improved his production with each passing season that he participated in. Last year, in just 11 games, had 900 yards and 6 touchdowns. In Miami, he's really joining a rebuilding franchise that's really badly in need of wide receiver talent. They're unlikely to compete for a playoff spot, and if they do remain somewhat competitive, it'll likely be due to Devon Achane having somewhat of an MVP season. But again, I think that Chris Bell arguably could start the year on IR. And let me explain that and why that works. You have IR spots on Dynasty. If you draft this guy, he can take one of those spots instead of taking a roster spot. Hypothetically and realistically, this guy could not play football this year. But once healthy and learning this offense for a full year without even stepping a foot on the football field, I think could very much help him in the fact of next year he could be a very vital part of this offense. Again, with his projections, 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, I mean, that's if he plays. I'm not sure that he plays enough to be a contributor in that aspect. Another guy I think is going to be a steal here, Jacoby Lane. Okay, he was drafted 80th overall for the Baltimore Ravens. He will be competing, and right below him, he will be competing with fellow rookie Elijah Surratt for some early playing time. Okay, the rookies added much needed size to a wide receiver room where speed and finesse, I would say, was Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, otherwise predominate, right? So last year, Lane has never reached 800 yards in a season during his 3 years at USC. But he did score 12 touchdowns in 2024 on 43 catches and averaged 67.7 yards per game in 2025 across 11 games. Big body, big target, red zone target. You also got to think he was shadowed, maybe shadowed by Mekhi Lemon, right, at USC last year. So, he often produced without creating much separation instead of relying on his length. Again, big body, 6'4", 200 pounds, near 40-inch vertical, and the strong hands to go along with the contested catches. On a less encouraging note, Lane does come with the usual drawbacks for a tall, thin wide receiver. He does lack change of direction and yards after the catch skills. His 40 time as a 4.47 was pleasant, but it's a skill set that rarely equates to considerable value in PPR leagues. But at least it can be useful as a red zone threat for Lamar Jackson, especially if he's got to stay above Surratt on the depth chart. But I really do think that, you think about it, you could put Zay Flowers, you could put even Rashad Bateman in the slot, and you use this guy as just a body, just to throw down there, man. The red zone touchdowns, I think for me, could be about 5 or 6 this year. And I think the yards here for me, the 396, I think that's a little high, but I think the touchdowns is a little shy. So Next guy we're going to talk about here is going to be Chris Braswell. Okay, drafted 22 years old for the Carolina Panthers. Braswell really fits the perfect archetype for the University of Tennessee wide receiver prospects. Okay, really big, tall, thin, 6'4", 198. Last year really stood out, 1,017 yards, 9 touchdowns, came to the combine, ran a 4.37. The Panthers really have assembled an unusually tall wide receiver room looking at it, and at least at the top of their depth chart, but Braswell is the only thin one. And that's where maybe the problem is. You got Tet, you got Leggett. He's the thin one, but I can see him battling Leggett for that wide receiver 3 spot. I think Jalen Coker came on last year, really solidified himself as the wide receiver 2. Obviously, Tet is the wide receiver 1. I don't think we need to argue that. But I think that Braswell could really come in and be that speed guy, the big, tall, deep threat, and could possibly take some Xavier Leggett snaps this next year. So next guy we're going to talk about, and which is interesting and why we're talking about deep stashes here, I think that Taylon Green could potentially be a very important deep stash. Okay, let me paint you a picture real quick. Let's say that Shedeur Sanders doesn't work out. Okay. Well, they just drafted a quarterback. So instead of focusing on a quarterback next year, maybe this Taylon Green guy is impressed in practice. I mean, he's sure impressed at the combine, right? I mean, he set the all-time quarterback marks for vertical jump, which was 43.5. Broad jump was 11 and 2 inches. And he ran the 3rd fastest recorded 40 time for a quarterback at a 4.36. So again, this guy comes into camp. He's impressive. He's just running things off the chart. He's intellectual. He's running the offense. And Shedeur goes out there and he loses the first 4 games. Well, we just drafted you a wide receiver, bud. We got you a tackle. We got you 2 wide receivers and a tackle. There's no excuse for Shedeur. So say he fumbles this year. Who's to say that Taylon Green is not the next guy waiting in the wings? This is where I would use a taxi slot to use Taylon Green, and I am not afraid to use an early second for Taylon Green. I mean, it is a 50-50 shot as if Shedeur hits or misses. And I'm telling you now, if he misses, Taylon Green has a very good shot to step into that role. I do not think that Deshaun Watson is going to be a factor. I do not think that he should be the starter. I don't think that he's really earned that. But that's not my decision to make, nor is anybody else's in this stream. So, again, I think that Taylon Green is a very important pick. I think could potentially be a very potential good sleeper that you could see very high value in the next coming years. So, next guy we're going to talk about is Carson Beck. And I think this guy actually holds just that much more value than Taylon Green. And let me explain why. Okay. 3rd round pick in 2026. Obviously he's likely going to back up Jacoby Brissett. 3-way competition with Gardner Minshew, however you want to call that. I think that Beck definitely needs some development time before he's thrust into NFL action. Especially playing behind a below average offensive line in Arizona, right? At Miami last season, though, Beck was prone to poor decision-making, especially when under pressure, which led to 12 interceptions. He is at his best when he plays in rhythm and gets the ball out quickly. Okay, bad things tend to happen when he holds on to the ball too long. With his frame being 6'5", 233, I mean, he has the ideal frame and is strong in the pocket. His velocity, though, seemingly never bounced back after he had a UCL surgery in 2024. And he only completed 72% of his passes last season. But his deep ball accuracy was the concern and was inconsistent. after a 6-year college career in 55 games. Beck's best attribute really in this is experience. And that's where I'll kind of throw this into where he values himself over, or I value him over other quarterbacks because of this experience. If he gets the opportunity this season, he'll have tight end, a great tight end, Trey McBride, to lean on. He has now a solid running back in Jeremiah Love, newcomer Tyler Algier. But again, wide receiver room, nothing to jump off the page. Marv and Michael Wilson have had solid seasons, but again, could use improvement, right? But I think that he's stepping into a decent situation minus the offensive line. Experience is there with the right coach, could potentially be something. So I would throw him in with the Taylon Greens. I think that he definitely has a better chance to start than like Garrett Nussmeier or Drew Allar. I mean, Drew Allar is coming off an injury as well. So there's so much up in the air. But yeah, no. Next guy we're going to talk about here, Nick Singleton. So Nick Singleton was drafted. It was a 5th-round pick for Tennessee. Really is just going to be an immediate depth role for the Titans. Okay, so they have Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, Julius Chestnut. They have some familiar faces, but I think that Nick Singleton could be a 1 to 2 year stash where he could maybe fight his way up in there once they move past Spears or Pollard. Next guy is Mike Washington, was snagged in the round 4 this year from the Las Vegas Raiders. Impressed at the combine with his speed, which he'll look to use to complement Ashton Jetney, who obviously this guy's not going to replace, right? I think this is at best a running back 2 for the Las Vegas Raiders. So again, just be careful how you are what you are spending pick wise. Next guy we're going to talk about, the next Penn State running back, Katron Allen, 187 overall pick. They did enter the draft with a need at running back. I think while they missed out on Love, I think the Commanders really got a steal on Allen in the 6th round. His 4,180 rushing yards at Penn State are the most in school history, ahead of several named big stars, obviously, including Saquon Barkley. He will split the backfield work with last year's 7th-round pick, JCM, Jacoby Krosky Merritt. Realistically, Allen could be this year's Kyle Monangai and potentially better for fantasy players. I mean, this Cottrell Allen, I think that could be an early second for me. I really do. I mean, it's an interesting pick to say the least. I mean, he could take the starting job from JCM. I mean, JCM did not impress me last year one bit. But yeah, no, I appreciate everybody joining in. We are going to be live on Wednesdays at 6 Central. Like I said, tonight was a little bit late. We had a meeting that we had to go over some stuff and just kind of tighten down the bolts and get a game plan going for this upcoming season. So we are excited. We are excited about the content. We're excited about the upcoming news. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in. It was fun. Next week, we're going to kind of look at maybe do some mock drafts. Okay. We're going to kind of start doing some mock drafts and kind of see where we see players falling at and maybe kind of get that information out there. So again, I appreciate everybody tuning in. It was fun. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Thank you.